Hello, my wonderful friends. Welcome back to our Malicious Compliance, where we unpack stories of folks who think they deserve it all. Today, we've got 10 epic tales. First, a notorious customer tries to scam free skewers at a barbecue joint, only to be outwitted when the server weighs his order. Second, a rude pizza customer threatens staff over pineapples, so they drench his pizza in pineapple juice without a single chunk. Third, a man refuses a female mechanic for his car's recall, waiting hours only to leave when the manager backs her. Fourth, an entitled Uber passenger cancels mid-ride to avoid the fare, ending up stranded near the Mexican border. Finally, a tech worker's strict lunch policy backfires when he pauses a critical repair for a mandatory break. Buckle up for these wild stories, hit subscribe, and enjoy the karma. A little bit of background. I own and operate a barbecue restaurant. We run a special promotion for the gyro, offering 1 kilogram of skewers, pork or chicken, for €6.50. This story happened on a Saturday night. A group came to watch the match between Belgium and Portugal. One of them is a guy known to almost all the restaurant owners in town. Let's call him Rick. Now, Rick has a tendency to complain about the food to get freebies. It's always either something extra or the whole order. They placed their orders, and about 20 minutes later, they were served. A few minutes after that, my head server, Mary, came inside and sat down, furious. She said, "Give me the scales now." I was slightly confused and asked, "What for?" She replied, "Just give me the scales." So I handed her the electronic scales, and she grabbed an empty plate and headed outside. I followed her because I knew something was up. She went to the group that included Rick, placed the scale on the table and proclaimed, "Okay, you want me to weigh them? Let's weigh them." You see, Rick had ordered the promotion and claimed his order was missing almost half of it. He then demanded 4 more skewers to make it correct. In almost any other place, he'd probably be right. Most places buy their skewers pre-made, and they weigh between 100 and 120 grams, which means a kilo is usually 10 skewers. But we prepare our skewers in-house, and they're much bigger, between 180 and 220 grams, so our kilo is usually 6 skewers. Basically, Rick was demanding almost another kilo of meat for free. Rick smugly said, "Yeah, let's weigh them, and then you can bring me what you still owe me." He laughed and told his friends he couldn't believe he got a server to bring out a scale to prove him right. Mary then grabbed the skewers and a fork, started removing the pieces of meat and placed them on the scales. Initially, Rick had a very smug smile, but he started to frown when 3 skewers were emptied, and the scales already showed more than half a kilo of meat. Finally, with the second piece from the 5th skewer, the scales showed just above a kilo. Mary held the remaining skewers, smiled smugly, and said, "It seems you were right about the order not being correct. We actually gave you more than a kilo, so I'll just take these back to the kitchen. Enjoy your food." Mary returned to the kitchen smiling and set the skewers aside while Rick ate his kilo of meat sullenly. The rest of his group of friends were joking and laughing at him. Guys, that was such a satisfying story. I love how his friends poked fun at him for being proved wrong, and of course Mary is an awesome server. I love how she put him on the spot and made him look foolish. Here's another great comment I found in the post. This person said, "I once hosted an event in a bar. It was a celebration for police trainees, new recruits, and that kind of thing. As I was busy slaving away, pouring drinks and such, this one woman who was absolutely full of herself was watching me pour measures for another customer. She made comments about the amount of ice in drinks, how I was using the wrong glass, which I wasn't, and other obnoxious remarks about how she was waiting to be served and that she was here first, which she wasn't. I was pouring some spirits. And for those who don't know, they come in standard sizes of 25 milliliters for singles and 50 milliliters for doubles. I reached the end of the bottle as I was pouring the whiskey, and there was a tiny drop left, so I poured those few extra milliliters into the glass, which you shouldn't really do, but who cares, right? Anyway, she got in my face about how it's technically illegal to pour extra measures, and that the law is the law, and that I should follow it to the letter. I tried to brush it off and ignore her, carrying on serving other customers, but she kept commenting on pretty much everything I was doing. As anyone who's ever worked in customer service knows, it's so annoying to have everything scrutinized and commented on as though you're nothing but a useless human being. When it was her turn, she asked for an alcoholic beverage. Using my limited powers, I asked her for her ID. She told me she didn't have it, went bright red in the face, and stuttered something about being old enough to be in the police. I got to tell her, "I'm sorry, if you don't have ID, I can't legally serve you. The law is the law, after all." She then had to settle for a lemonade. My friends, it's so funny how karma works. It must have been so hard for the original poster not to laugh in her face right at that moment. Guys, just be nice to the people who serve you. Don't be a jerk. Speaking of people being jerks, the next story is absolutely fantastic. Next story. When I was in high school, my best friend and I worked at a pizza joint. We were drivers and would make pizzas between deliveries on slow days. One slow weekday evening, a guy called in and ordered a pizza. We'd had this guy order many times, and he's a grade A jerk. He always orders a specialty pizza that typically has pineapples on it, but requests no pineapples be added. I guess one time someone forgot and sent it out. Before you think it, no, it's not an allergy thing, it's a pineapples don't belong on pizza thing. Today, after he made his order, he took it a step further and said, "Last time, you fools put pineapples on it when I specifically told you not to. I swear, if I see a single piece of pineapple on my pizza, I'm coming in personally to ruin your day." We were thinking, whoa. I hung up, shocked at the unnecessary threat to a teenage boy, one who's about to handle his food, and told my buddy about the call. Immediately, our wheels started turning and we devised a brilliant plan. We made his pizza exactly as he requested, but before tossing it into the oven, we each grabbed giant handfuls of pineapple and squeezed out all the juice we could onto his pizza. When we were finished, there was a standing pool of fluid across the entire pan. I cooked it, boxed it, and had the pleasure of delivering it. When he answered the door, he threatened me again, saying, "If this pizza has pineapple on it, I will personally make sure you or whoever made this pizza will lose your job." I told him, "Sir, I personally made this pizza myself, and I can guarantee you that you will not find a single pineapple anywhere." Satisfied, he took the box from me, and I headed back to the restaurant. Let me tell you, I was giddy, like I was waiting for a crush to call me. I stared at the phone, willing it to ring. Finally it did, and the caller ID confirmed my hopeful anticipation. The guy basically lost his mind, screaming about how he demanded no pineapple, but it's all he could taste. I calmly told him that I was the one who made and delivered it, and reassured him that I put no pineapple on the pizza at all. I said, "Sir, please take a picture of the pizza, because if a pineapple made it onto the pizza, we want to make it right." As I said before, I made it myself and was extra mindful that no pineapple was even added. The guy finished his profanity-laced tirade and slammed the phone down. I'm still waiting for him to come in and give us a beatdown. Always be nice to people who handle your food. It's never a good idea to threaten anybody, or you might get pineapple juice on your pizza. With that said though, guys, listen, pineapples on pizza, yes or no? Leave it in the comments below. Next story. Many years ago, I worked at a car dealership. The attached service garage was small, and I was the only licensed mechanic. I'm also female. I would occasionally have issues with male customers who would second-guess me when I gave them a diagnosis, but that wasn't the only thing. Some would stand in the bay doors and watch while I worked on their cars and then double-check my work in the parking lot. I didn't deal with customers directly and would often get my apprentice to pull cars in and out of the shop for me. This particular morning, we were very busy. The lot jockey and apprentice were occupied helping wash cars for delivery and driving to a customer's house. The service advisor left a work order and the keys at the parts counter, and I went out the front through service to get the car. It was in for a service campaign, which was an update done with a scan tool. It usually takes about 10 minutes. The customer was planning on waiting and was sitting in the service area when he saw me with his keys in my hand. He immediately stood up, looking alarmed. I was hustling, so I walked right by him and out the door. I totally missed the conversation, but according to the service advisor, who was also female, the customer said, "Hey, who's that woman? Is she going to be working on my car? I don't want her working on my car." The advisor told him that the other tech was out at the moment, so it would be quite a wait until someone else could look at his car. The guy then said, "That's fine, I'll wait for a guy. I don't want a woman touching my car." The advisor politely said, "Understood." The advisor came to let me know, and I pulled the car out, put the work order and the keys back on the counter, and didn't care. About half an hour passed. The apprentice was still away, and I was happily working on something else, bringing cars in and out. The customer was now watching every person who came in the door. The high school co-op student came in to get something signed. The customer's keys were still on the desk, and it had been about an hour. The customer said, "Hey, why hasn't my car gone in yet? Can't you get this guy to do it?" The advisor told him, "No, sorry, he's just a student, so he's not allowed to drive the cars due to liability and insurance concerns." The guy told her, "Just get someone to bring the car in, and he can do the work." This was supposed to take 10 minutes. The advisor said, "Sorry, sir, he's just a high school student doing his co-op. He's not approved to perform warranty work. Only licensed techs and apprentices can do the recall." The car jockey returned, and the service advisor handed him a different set of keys. He brought yet another car into the shop for me. The customer was becoming irate. He said, "I've been sitting here for over an hour now, and I've watched 5 cars go in before mine. My appointment was for 8 o'clock in the morning. This is getting ridiculous." At this point, he said he didn't care who did the recall, but it had to be a guy. The service advisor started listing off the names of men who worked at the dealership and explained why they couldn't perform the recall. She said, "Well, there's Harmon, but he's just a car jockey. He doesn't know how to work on cars. Then there's Chet, but he's about 17 years old. I wouldn't want him doing the recall personally, but I guess we could ask Mike. But Mike is the parts guy. He doesn't really know how to use a scan tool. The detailers are all guys, but they know nothing about cars." The customer was fuming at this point and demanded to talk to the service manager. The manager came out of his office and guided the customer into the garage. He's pretty old school. He lit up a cigarette, stood at the end of my bay, and pointed at me. He said, "You see her? She's my best technician. Those guys over there, they take orders from her. You can either wait for her to finish what she's working on and then ask her if she's still willing to do your work, or you can take your car somewhere else." The guy was pretty shaken up at this point, but he took his car and left 2 hours after he first arrived. I don't think we ever saw him again, which wasn't much of a loss, all things considered. The manager always stuck up for me and took my side. The service advisor has a very deadpan sense of humor. She knew full well it would have easily been an hour before the apprentice returned and that nobody else could do the recall. Guys, honestly, to me, I don't care who does the work. If I have a problem and you can fix it, you're my go-to person. I really don't understand why some people still think this way, but that's just me. My friends, let me know what you think. Next story. In 2018, I lived in Southern California and was finishing up graduate school. Uber was my side hustle. However, I only did it for a little while because I'm not the most patient person and eventually got tired of people's nonsense and attitudes. One common tactic for customers looking to scam a driver was to cancel their rides in the middle of the trip to avoid paying the fare. They would often say they did it accidentally and ask if I could just finish the trip because we were basically there anyway. This happened to me 3 times. The first 2 times I pulled over and told them to get out of my car, which they did. The third time is the subject of this post. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday when I decided to log on and catch some fares. Most people go into the office on Tuesdays and Thursdays and are looking to get rides home between 4 and 5 in the evening to beat traffic. I should mention that I was living in San Diego. If you know the area, you'd know that many people work in the city and live in the outer areas because it's cheaper. On the day of the event, I picked up a middle-aged woman who was a student at the local community college downtown. Although she was in community college, I could tell she had money by the way she dressed and where she was going. She got in my car and started making conversation with me. I was driving through town, and as I was about to get on the highway, I heard the cancellation ding. I pulled over to a parking lot and let her know that she had canceled the ride and that I couldn't drive her until she rebooked it. She gave me the "it was an accident" excuse. I told her not a problem, just rebook the route. At this point, all those people I mentioned earlier had just gotten off work, and we were in what I call the power hour of maximum surge pricing. Where she was going was about 25 to 40 minutes from downtown San Diego, depending on the traffic. I looked, and the trip would have cost her $70. She told me she wasn't going to pay that. I said fine, and asked her to exit my vehicle. She refused. She then told me to take her home like I was her chauffeur. At this point, I was furious, and I wouldn't have done it even if she gave me $100 in cash. I asked her politely again to leave, and she refused. I had never gotten to this point before. The 2 other people were guys, and I would have had no qualms about yanking them out by force and dealing with them in the middle of the highway. However, that wouldn't have been a good look in this situation. I thought about going to the police, given that we were 3 blocks from their headquarters, but I wanted her to feel the burn. Cue the malicious compliance. I asked if she wanted a free ride and she suddenly perked up and said, "I knew you'd come around. It's about darn time." I told her to buckle up and we got on Interstate 5. Here's the part where I tell you that San Diego is 16 miles from the Mexican border. I also keep my passport in my glove compartment because I did volunteer work in Rosarito every so often. About 4 minutes into the ride, she asked where we were going. I turned around and said, "I'm going to Tijuana, and I'm glad you could join me. I hope you brought your passport." At first, she didn't think I was serious, but by exit 4, she started to panic. I told her she was welcome to get out any time, but she needed to make a decision soon because after we passed exit 1, there was no turning back. I also told her I wasn't taking her back. She got the message and pleaded for me to pull over. I pulled over and dropped her off at the outlet mall near the border. Just for a good laugh, I checked the Uber rate from the mall to La Jolla, where she was going, and the cheapest rate was $87 for a pool ride. I didn't make any money that night, but that was the richest experience I've ever had while being a rideshare driver. I stopped about a month later and sold my car. Listen, sometimes you have to go to great lengths and scare an entitled scammer to teach them a lesson. I bet she'll think twice before pulling that stunt again. Next story. This story takes place some time ago, probably in the early 2000s, but this event is burned into my brain. I've worked in K-12 education technology for most of my 20 years in my professional career. When I first started, I was the only technician for a small to medium-sized school district of about 2,500 students. During the time of the event, the director of special education was married to the superintendent. I reported to the business manager, who used to teach technology but was not a technical person. For the most part, I was left to do my work and was not overly micromanaged. I got into the habit of taking my lunch whenever I felt like it, or even not at all. If I didn't take lunch and there was no pressing work, I would just leave a little early at the end of the day. As time went on, I got in trouble for leaving early, so I started taking my lunch whenever time permitted. Sometimes it was when there was only an hour left of work, sometimes not, but I would chill at my desk and mess around. The others in the office where my desk was reported me for messing around. Every afternoon when I tried to explain to the business manager that I was taking my lunch, she said something to the effect of, "Listen, you can no longer take your lunch whenever you want. Your lunch is from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. I told her, "No problem, message received." Starting that day, no matter what I was doing at 12 o'clock, I would stop and take my lunch. If I was at my desk, I would proceed to mess around. If I was at a school site, I would go sit in my car. Fast forward about a month or two later. It was about 11:30, and the director of special education called and said his computer wasn't working, and I needed to come fix it right away. I told him, "Sure thing, I'm on my way." When I got to his office, he said, "Please fix it," and headed off to a meeting. I started removing all the spyware he had managed to collect, and about a third of the way in, 12 o'clock hit. I stood up, walked out of his office, and told his secretary that I'd be back in 1 hour. I went to my car, expecting a phone call any minute. Sure enough, about 15 minutes in, I got a call from my manager. Here's how the call went. My manager said, "So, I hear you walked out on the director without fixing his computer. What's up with that?" I told her. "Correct, it's my lunchtime." She said, "What do you mean, you couldn't fix his computer first?" I told her I could have, but remember that time you told me I could not decide when my lunch break was and that I had to take lunch from 12 to 1 o'clock? She said, "Wait, that's not what I meant." "You know that's not what I meant." I told her, "But that's what you said. If I had stayed and worked on the computer and took my lunch at 1 o'clock or 1:30, I didn't want to get in trouble for messing around when I was supposed to be working." She said, "Okay, I'll call you back." About 15 minutes later, she called back, asking if I could please go back in and finish the computer, and that from now on, I was allowed to decide when the best time was to take my lunch. It was never talked about again. I was never given grief again for messing around, and it was nice being able to go home early when I didn't eat my lunch. The original poster executed that malicious compliance perfectly. I'm so glad it worked out for him in the end. Next story. Gramps had just moved into a retirement park with a lot that backed up to county land, which was a nature preserve. His backyard was basically non-existent, but he didn't mind as he got to look out over the preserve. However, he did marvel at how his next-door neighbor's backyard extended. A good 8 feet past his, giving his neighbor a nice space back there. Gramps tried to be friendly with all his neighbors, exchanging phone numbers and the like. One day he noticed his next-door neighbor was putting down expensive pavers that extended from his back door all the way to the old fence post that designated the preserve boundary. Gramps watched the neighbor yank the 3 rickety fence posts out of the ground and move them back an extra 2 feet into the preserve before pounding them back in. Then he started to clear the land, intending to gain more area for his pavers. Gramps used to work for the National Park Service as a young lad, so he thought he had better warn his neighbor of the consequences of his actions. He headed out back for a little chat. The neighbor was immediately defensive, and before Gramps could say much, the neighbor told him, "You're new here. I've been here for 10 years. Mind your own darn business." So Gramps decided not to press the issue. Nothing happened that year, but the following year, when most of the park emptied, out to head north for the summer, the county came by to check on the preserve. Gramps noticed them going back and forth between his neighbors' houses. The workers were pulling out maps, taking photos, and making phone calls. Soon, more people showed up. It turned out the neighbor had moved the posts several times over the years, and in reality, his backyard was supposed to be even smaller than Gramps' backyard. To make matters worse, the neighbor had put pavers in the back specifically to park both his golf carts and a cherry red sports car back there for the summer. The county would have to move them before they could do anything else. They taped a red notice to his front door and left. Gramps went over to read it, and it stated that the neighbor was in violation of encroaching onto protected land. He had 30 days to move his car, tear up the pavers, and pay a fine of $11,000. Failure to do so within 30 days would result in the golf carts and car being towed and impounded, the pavers being dug up and carted off at the neighbor's expense, and the fine increasing for every additional day past the deadline. 30 days came and went. A week after that, Gramps had quite the show as the first car and cart were towed. After that, the pavers were dug up and hauled off, and the old fence posts and ropes were replaced with metal posts embedded into buried cement bases, connected by steel cables. The whole process took several weeks to finish, and the preserve looked much more legitimate when they were done. A few solar cameras were installed so the county could keep an eye on wildlife and encroachers. Meanwhile, more notices were taped to the front door of the neighbor's house. By November, the snowbirds were flooding back to the park, including the neighbor. This was Gramps' second show of the summer as the neighbor read all the notices, digging down until he read the first one. Then, he ran out back and started screaming and cursing up a storm before running back to his car to dig out a cell phone. Gramps stayed indoors to avoid the guy as he frantically tried to unload his car and get everything powered up, all while trying to get someone at the county to pick up the phone and give him some answers. He finally got a live person and proceeded to scream at them while on speakerphone about his car and cart. The call kept getting kicked to other people because who wants to help a screamer? Basically, the neighbor was told to come by the county office to get this straightened out. 3 days later, the neighbor caught Gramps outside and asked if he was there when the county stole his car and destroyed his backyard. Gramps said he was, and the neighbor asked, "Well, why didn't you call me when you saw them putting notices on my door? You had my number. You could have stopped them." Gramps said he thought about doing that, but figured the neighbor would have preferred him to mind his own darn business, so he decided against it. This tale was absolutely brilliant, guys. The neighbor definitely deserved it for being so rude and incredibly entitled, extending his backyard onto a nature preserve and doing it multiple times over the years. He was bound to get caught sooner or later. Next story. This popped into my mind recently. I used to work at a retail tropical fish store, and as weird as it sounds, we were very well known. We used to provide the aquarium with rare fish, and people would drive from 2 to 3 states over if they were true fish enthusiasts to come buy from us. I was 17 at the time, a female, and an expert in tropical fish and koi. In fact, it was my job that summer to be the koi and outdoor pond person. My job was not only stocking the ponds, but also managing all the plants, caring for them, and knowing every bit of information on all the prices and various koi and goldfish we had. I knew diets, temperature ranges, places of origin, and special breeds. I knew it all. They would even call me with questions on my days off. But that clearly didn't matter to one customer. He came inside the store and asked for help with the koi outside. I happily agreed, as I was the only person not on my lunch break. This guy frankly seemed put off by me offering to help. Instead of buying anything, he decided to quiz me for 20 minutes about the koi, goldfish and pond plants to try to get me to admit that I didn't know anything. I answered every single one of his silly questions, and some were really silly. At the end of the 20 minutes he had the nerve to say, "Can I talk to someone who knows things? Like a man?" With full emphasis and tone on those words. I said with a fake smile, "Sure you can. Let me get John for you. Here's the malicious compliance." John, name changed, was 75, retired, annoying as heck, and a bit eccentric. John was an expert in goldfish but hated koi and outdoor ponds. He was, like I said, really annoying and eccentric, but he had a soft spot for me, so we would always chat. I went inside to find John and explained that this customer wanted a man to talk to. John asked why he wanted to speak to a man when I was the pond point person. I told him the customer clearly didn't want to speak to a girl. John nodded knowingly, got this mischievous smile on his face, and went to help the customer. 5 minutes later, I heard a man yelling in the parking lot. I ran outside to find the customer screaming at John and cursing him out, saying, "What is wrong with you? Does nobody know anything around here? I will never come back. You are all horrible and know nothing about fish, and you're all terrible employees." I watched the guy hop into his car, slam the door, and drive off. I asked John what happened, and he said, every time he asked me a question, I said, I'm not sure. That's a good question, though. I could go ask OP. She's an expert at our pond stuff. Apparently, the customer did not like that. I like John. He sounds like a really great guy. Judging by OP's comments, she and John were best buds at work. She says he used to bring her mini pies every day after finding out she liked them. He's now retired in Florida, but she thinks about how much they messed with rude customers together. I love how John had her back, and they had such a wonderful relationship. Next story. I've been serving in a certain military branch for 5 years, and I'm nearing the end of my contract, so my motivation is completely gone. I'm in charge of inventory for specific pieces of equipment, smaller pieces used by many people at my job from time to time. These pieces disappear often, which usually means things are misplaced. But we just got out of a period where we had many hired contractors at our job who tended to take things. Every once in a while, we conduct inventory of these pieces for accountability reasons. When we lose things, it looks very bad on my work, more specifically on my bosses. So I prepared the inventory and was startled by the number of missing pieces. I did everything I needed to do and presented the inventory to my boss. He didn't believe we had so many pieces missing and asked me to inventory them again. So I did. I got the same number and put the inventory in his inbox. A few months went by, and I got the same response. "There can't be that many. Do another one." So, I was very compliant and did it again, and again, and again. This dragged on over a year, and I started to notice something. My boss was about to leave soon, and he was deliberately pushing this off to the next person to cover himself. Last week I was sleeping since I work nights, and I was woken up. My boss told me I had to do a specific survey with my coworkers that would get sent up to the head honcho. This survey allowed the small guy to have a voice directly to the top. I told him I had night watch, but he didn't care and demanded I do the survey immediately, reminding me he's my boss. Fine. Before the survey started, our boss told us we needed to be completely honest, and these surveys were anonymous. Great. I wrote down what had been happening with the inventory and directed them to where they could find the documentation of the completed inventories. Fast forward to yesterday, all my bosses were fired, and now I'm reporting to new people who are fixing the issues with the inventory. Judging by the comments, a lot of stuff goes missing in the military. One comment that stuck out was, "Believe it or not, in my country, there was once a missing jet engine from a military base. The thing was larger than an elephant, but somehow it made it out of the main gate. It turns out some higher-ups were doing shady underground deals with an organized group, all for money." That's wild, guys. How would you even explain a missing jet engine the size of an elephant? It's not like you can sneak it out in your back pocket or anything. That just sounds absolutely ridiculous. Next story. This was a long time ago, but I remember it clearly. We moved into a community with a tight space between our house and our neighbors. We didn't like them being able to see into our kitchen, so we put up a bunch of plants costing thousands of dollars. My parents thought it would be worth it. A week later, my parents woke up to find the plants completely chopped down. My father was furious and marched down to our neighbor's house. The neighbor told my father that the plants were on his property line, so he had the total right to take them down. He warned that if anything went on his property again, he would report us to the authorities immediately. Later that day, my father called the company that put in the plants, and with the warranty, we could have them replanted the next week for no charge. We made sure there was no way they were on our neighbor's property. However, a few days later, we caught them chopping the plants down at 2 a.m. We called the police for obstruction of property. After a chat with our neighbor, he decided to call a professional to mark the property line. My father agreed. A few days later, I got home to find orange tape in my neighbor's yard. Apparently, his fence was 11 feet over on our property line. We watched as he took down his fence, completely furious. Within the next month, we were enjoying our new space and privacy in our backyard, and our neighbor ended up losing a quarter of his backyard. He had to pay almost $10,000 for the destruction of our property, and we got to plant our plants again. That is a huge oof, my friends. If I were OP, I would always be sitting in that lovely extra space in my yard that used to belong to my silly neighbors. Karma definitely works in mysterious ways. Next story. I work in a casual fine dining restaurant in the downtown area. Prices aren't crazy, but they're high enough that we don't get a super young crowd. I would say the average age of our dinner crowd is usually 30 to 60, although it varies more on the weekend. I include this information so you understand why I didn't initially ask for identification, even though you should always check. On Thursday night, a table of 4 came in for an early dinner, 2 Karens and their daughters. I was ready for them to split entrees and tip me 15%. They ordered a pitcher of sangria, and I told them I'd be right back with that. Mama Karen said, "You really aren't going to check these girls' IDs? Her birthday was just last month." "Aren't you supposed to check anybody who looks under 40? She was correct, and I should have asked for identification, even though the girls were with their mothers. I was being lazy by assuming they were of age, since their moms didn't stop them from ordering drinks. I agreed with her and said I'm actually supposed to check all IDs, regardless of age. I proceeded to look at all 4 of the ladies' IDs. Unfortunately for Mama Karen, her birthday was a few days prior, and her ID had expired. In the state of Michigan, it's illegal to serve alcohol to anybody with an expired ID, regardless of age. So I had to deny Mama Karen a glass of the sangria. She spent the whole night sipping on water, while the others shared the pitcher. It felt good that Karen's antics backfired on her. Guys, Karen totally played herself on that one. I'm surprised she didn't go as far as asking for the manager and throwing a fit. I also had no idea it's illegal to serve alcohol to someone with an expired ID. These stories of entitled behavior never cease to amaze me, and I'm excited to dive into my thoughts on each one. Barbecue restaurant? I'm thrilled by Mary's epic takedown of Rick at the barbecue restaurant. His scam to get free skewers by claiming short portions is infuriating, especially since he's notorious for it. I love how Mary turned his smugness against him by weighing the meat right there, proving he got more than a kilo. The image of him eating sullenly while his friends laughed is pure justice. I'd have cheered Mary on. She's a rock star for not letting him bully her. Pizza joint? The pizza guy's pineapple juice prank is genius. Threatening a teenage worker over a no pineapple request is uncalled for, and I'd be just as tempted to mess with him. Squeezing pineapple juice onto the pizza was a clever way to comply while giving him exactly what he didn't want. I can imagine the glee waiting for his outraged call. I'd have done the same, maybe even added a cheeky enjoy on delivery. The lesson here, don't threaten food service workers, is spot on. Car dealership. The sexist customer at the dealership got what he deserved. I'd be livid if someone dismissed my skills because I'm a woman, especially after hustling in a busy garage. The service advisor's deadpan handling, listing all the men who couldn't do the job, was brilliant. I love how the manager backed her up, pointing out she's the best tech. I'd have relished seeing the customer's face as he left, tail between his legs. Uber driver. The Uber driver's Tijuana bluff is next-level malicious compliance. I'd be furious at a passenger canceling mid-ride to scam a free trip, then refusing to leave. Taking her toward the border was a bold move. I'd have been tempted to do the same to teach her a lesson. Her panic at exit 4 must have been satisfying. I love how the driver checked the surge rate afterward. $87 to La Jolla is a sweet burn. School it technician. The IT tech's lunch break compliance is perfection. I'd be annoyed if my boss micromanaged my breaks, especially after years of flexibility. Stopping mid-task at noon to sit in my car is exactly the petty move I'd pull to prove a point. The manager's backpedaling after the director's computer went unfixed is hilarious. I'd have savored that victory too. Nature preserve neighbor. Gramps' neighbor got what was coming. Encroaching on a nature preserve with pavers and a sports car is blatant entitlement. I'd have been tempted to call the county myself after his mind your business jab. Watching him lose his car, golf carts, and backyard while racking up an $11,000 fine must have been glorious. I'd have sipped coffee on my porch, enjoying the show. Fish store. The fish store customer's sexism is infuriating. Quizzing a knowledgeable teenage girl for 20 minutes to prove she doesn't know anything is pathetic. I'd have been fuming but kept my cool like the op. John's trolling, redirecting every question back to her expertise, is brilliant. I love their bond. Mini pies are the sweetest touch. I'd have laughed watching the guy storm off. Military inventory. The military inventory story is satisfying. I'd be frustrated if my boss kept dismissing my work to dodge accountability. Writing it all in the anonymous survey was a smart move. I'd have done the same to expose the issue. The boss is getting fired is sweet justice. Neighbor's plants. The neighbor chopping down thousands of dollars worth of plants is outrageous. I'd be as furious as the OP's father, especially catching him at it again at 2 a.m. The property line reveal, 11 feet of his fence on their land, is poetic justice. I'd have relished planting new plants in that extra space. Restaurant ID check. Mama Karen's ID fiasco is hilarious. Calling out the server for not checking IDs, only to be denied sangria because her own ID was expired, is peak self-own. I'd have been tempted to pour the other's drinks extra slowly to rub it in. Her restraint in not demanding a manager is surprising. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our malicious compliance. I hope you enjoyed the stories today. If you guys missed yesterday's episode, check it out if you haven't. I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you.